Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Digital Edge podcast. I'm Dominik with my co-host Françoise.
Hi, Dominik.
Hi. And today we have a little bit of a treat, a special topic. Françoise, you want to give a brief introduction of what we're up to today?
Yes, absolutely. We are just in the news because at the moment there is the Davos World Economic Forum happening here in Switzerland.
We're not
And
talking about politics, though, right?
no, no. So this edition is a record because there are like 400 top political leaders attending, including 60 heads of state and government, and nearly 850 chairs and CEOs of many of the world leading companies. So it's a big forum. You mentioned, the geopolitical context is quite challenging, but we will not talk about this. We will focus on our favorite topics, which is technology and digital transformation.
Much
And
more
in Davos
interesting.
this year, obviously, AI is a very hot topic on both its promises and perils. We see business executives that will examine how to apply AI to boost efficiency and profits. We see advocacy groups and union labor leaders that will warn about the threats of AI on jobs and livelihoods. And we also see the policymakers to see how they can navigate between the regulation on one side and the right to innovate on the other side. So definitely AI is at the core of Davos this year.
Yeah, it looks like indeed the focal point in a technology and innovation standpoint. I didn't even look at any of the other topics that are being discussed. Again, like you said, the geopolitical matters as well, of course, are taking the forefront and all of the attention. But I think it's fascinating that technology has such a huge footprint at a meeting like this. So, do we want to start and see what some of the leaders in AI have talked about this week so far?
Yes, and so what we decided to do for this special episode is look at the speeches from four leaders of in the tech world, and to start with, we look at NVIDIA. Dominik, do you want to give us a quick summary of what was the core of the speech of Jensen Huang?
Yeah, happy to briefly do that. Right. So NVIDIA provides a lot of the infrastructure, the computing infrastructure for what makes AI possible. And of course, Jensen Huang, the leader of NVIDIA, has talked about AI as an infrastructure, right? As a fundamental piece of enabling AI, and also the implications to jobs economically. And I think the last piece, which is kind of a focal area, is national and global strategy for building out infrastructure in AI, right? That every nation, he recommends basically, right? That every nation looks at building out their own infrastructure, building out their own AI capabilities, as to not to rely on others, and localize that as well, right? And get their own particular flavor to that. What were some of your impressions on Jensen's talks?
Well, on one side, it's not surprising that he's pushing for models that are going to develop his business. I mean, this is
Right.
obvious that, what he recommends paves the route for more business, more profit for his company. But I think he's right on two fronts. One is definitely AI is here to stay, and in the same way that we have infrastructure for water, electricity, roads, I think having treating AI infrastructure as a core infrastructure for any country, I think that would be the right direction. And not to bring again the geopolitical agenda, but in a world where allies and collaboration and cooperation can be challenged every day or questioned, I think that going in the direction where countries have a certain degree of autonomy and rely on their own infrastructure could be a more stable solution for many. So yeah, that would be my take on this speech. What about you, Dominic?
Yeah, I think fair points, right? Even though, like you said, right, every business leader is there to advocate for their own business effectively, right? That they can gain at least indirect benefits from their proposals and their viewpoints. But I think you're right with regards to building out localized capability, right? That nations are able to function themselves and starting get into the infrastructure and build their own capabilities, right? And right now a lot of the foundation work in AI is driven out of the United States, right? Which is good for United States. China is doing a lot of work as well. Europe is doing some work as well. We'll hear a little bit later on that perspective as well. But again, right, I think it's a fair point to look at AI as infrastructure for a country, a region, and to build that out much like you would with anything else. So yeah, interesting to see how that develops, right? Because again, NVIDIA is interested in building more data centers because it will generate revenues for them. But yeah, nonetheless, I think it's a fair observation, right, to have nations be independent to some extent.
So moving to our next CEO, Microsoft, Satya Nadella. I think, in the same vein of what we have discussed already, obviously is preaching for his own company, but so his point was about, how we need to gain in terms of efficiency of AI systems, which is a big topic. His point being that on many of the usage of AI today are done by countries or companies that can afford it. And I think his idea is, how can we make it cheaper so that it becomes more mainstream for other countries and other usage. So I think that's, the direction is giving. There was also a question about whether AI is an economic bubble and if it's going to burst at some point. Of course, he couldn't say yes. So how he argues this point is to say that there is still much more countries or more users to be equipped. So this is not going to stop overnight. And especially, I think the point is that AI is not confined to tech companies, but it's really being adopted across all industries. So yeah, that was the position, making AI cheaper so that more people can use it, which, for me is just usually the direction of new technologies where, it starts expensive and for a few segments and then it expands and becomes cheaper. So I think is probably just stating the obvious. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be the objective. And I think you're right on that point as well, where the technology naturally will converge towards a smaller footprint, right? Right now, the demand, there's just no technical way to put a data center into a mobile device, for example, right? But like we saw in the early days of computing in the 1900s, that a computer was the size of a house, right? And now something that's 1 million times more capable fits into our pocket. And you would expect that over time, this will happen the same way as compute models advance, as algorithms and software and the theory behind it also advances. And so I think this is something that must happen, right? Otherwise, the access to the technology will be limited to those who can afford it, right, and build these gigantic data centers that are required.
Yeah. So moving to the next leader is DeepMind. Do you want to walk us through the main highlights?
Yeah, so Demis was also at the conference talking about AGI, right? This is a term that also was coined like in the AI world, artificial general intelligence, where the objective is ultimately to have the technology behave like a human would, right? Today, with what we're using with large language models, it's not per se intelligence, right? It just mimics intelligence based on the content that these systems were trained with, but it gives the appearance of intelligence. And so I think, again, there's much evolution to be done in that place as well. The impact, of course, of AGI, and there's multiple fronts, right? And I think there's some positive aspects. He talked about improvements to human health, which I think is a huge opportunity, unfortunately untapped so far, right? But I think it needs a bit of focus. And he also talked about, competition, again, geopolitically, how nations are competing better, other nations catching up to what the US is doing, right? And this competition basically encouraging everybody to move faster and better. And of course, in his perspective, Google's DeepMind still is staying ahead of it and at the front of what's currently possible and pushing the boundaries there. What did you think? What did you see in his talks about the key points and what the future might look like?
So my first reaction would be finally we are going to use AI for solving critical problems. I think we discussed that in a previous episode, that a lot of the AI resources today are used for entertainment and very shallow, improvements in terms of gaining a bit of time, but we haven't solved the core or the critical issues. So I think
cancer hasn't been cured yet, right? Which
exactly.
was the early objectives of AI, right?
Yeah. And I think, and we'll see also with the next speaker that everybody is concerned about independence and competitiveness, and it's an incredible technology, and unfortunately people are not cooperating or collaborating. It's still reflecting the reality of the world, where countries are competing and trying to gain the most of the market. So I think we see that very apparent in what Demis Hassabis has said. So moving to our last speaker for today. I could not put a French a French speaker, Arthur Mensch, the CEO of Mistral AI, and it links really well with the other topics, because he's reinforcing the need for sovereignty, the independence of Europe versus the US, and also having a strong angle in terms of open source models that aim to lower the barriers to entry and give more accessibility to users to AI. I think he reinforced, as he has already done in the past, that Mistral is not for sale and is not going to be taken over by the foreign companies. So I think it's a different point of view, but still very aligned with the other topics that we heard from the other three.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, to me sometimes, that Mistral has been able to survive and progress as well as it did, in considering the financial backing that some of the US organizations have, and the ability to invest accordingly, right? And I haven't followed it too closely from a from a business perspective, right? But kudos to Arthur and team for again pushing basically Europe's entry into the AI space, right? And maybe it's a model for more of the same, right? That it can also enable an ecosystem more that's maybe more competitive to the United States, with more small companies being able to leverage the capabilities and feeding in that and enabling the AI ecosystem into regular businesses, right? That can then leverage technology and advance and be more competitive and offer better products to their customers.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the concern about data sovereignty is very big in Europe. I mean, to the point you probably heard that a few months back, even Switzerland launched its own AI platform that
Right.
did not succeed so well so far. But I think it's very it's a big concern, and I think that may be one of the reasons why those players will survive despite the imbalance in terms of funding, obviously.
Mm.
Super. Thank you so much, Dominik, for sharing perspective on a very topical agenda. We are almost live from Davos, which is quite exciting. And
Yes.
we'll continue following the trends and the news for our listeners.
Yes, I think much more to come, right? And I think in conclusion, right? Again, this is a high level conference, right? It doesn't go into much detail, and it's really fascinating, right? Again, that this topic has elevated to get that much attention at a conference like this. And I think there's one thing to look out for is also the impact that AI has, right? Which has been long talked about on jobs, skills, the workforce, and so forth, right? There's been fears about displacement of workers, companies adapting, the remaining competitive, and so forth, right? Where I think this fear is stifling a little bit the progress and the adoption, because if you adopt more, maybe people are worried that their jobs might be in jeopardy because a computer can then do what they do, right? But I think more focus has to be on the human aspect in all of this, right? That the human is really, so far with the technology, is the enabler for anything that will be done with AI, because that's where the intelligence really is, and it knows, the human knows what needs to be achieved and what needs to be done, right? And AI, I still see it as a tool that can help us do better, rather than a replacement for what humans are up to these days. So curious how that will come across as well. All right, that's it from today's episode from the WEF in Davos 2026. And we'll see you on the next episode of The Digital Edge.
Thank you, Dominik. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for watching.